Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, it's Memorial Day weekend. We're kicking off a short series of recordings that are kind of what we're going to get us through June and part of July here. So primarily what we're going to be doing is, just ranking the NFC North in terms of positions. Obviously the Vikings will be our focus as always, but that will be kind of what we'll be doing to fill time when we don't really have a whole bunch of news to work with or just any general stuff that we've been able to kind of toss around on the podcast in the past. So that's what we'll be doing moving forward. Today we're doing quarterbacks and running backs. We'll also talk briefly about the 5 rookies that have signed their deals. Obviously not a whole lot to discuss there, but just we'll touch on the major news items that come up as they go throughout this month. And just a quick shout out to episode 69. We're all the way here. Nice. I feel like it'd be wrong of me to not point that out and say nice. So welcome to episode 69. Let's get started here with these contracts, Drew. Basically a handful of day 3 picks. I believe it's Ben Gideon, Jaleel Johnson, Rodney Adams, Ifedi Odenigbo, and there's one more on that list.
I think it was Hodges, wasn't it?
And Hodges, yeah. Or something like that. Anyways, regardless, 5 day 3 picks round out the majority, or the contracts that have been signed. And from what I understand at this point, basically the reason why a lot of guys haven't been signed is a issue with the collective bargaining agreement. I'm not going to get too into that without knowing a whole lot about it, but Drew, I guess, what does this mean for the team, if anything at all, that they have these guys under contract?
Yeah, it's just this is mostly just kind of routine business. It's very rare that something, especially with these late round guys, that there's usually an issue with this type of thing. There's some kind of, I think it's an issue with the language that the NFLPA is kind of getting ready and geared up for the next, when they have to, work on a new collective bargaining agreement. I think that's in 2021 or something.
Yep.
So
it's coming up.
Right. That's kind of one issue they're getting ready for, but that's way into the future. I don't anticipate anything, affecting the rest of the Vikings rookies as far as their contracts. This early, you can't really anticipate anything bad happening.
Yeah, and until anything really comes out about like a prolonged standoff between the Vikings and the rookies, or just any team and their rookies, I don't think there's anything to worry about really. So I guess simply put here, we got 5 guys under contract now that weren't under contract before. That's just squared away so they can concentrate more on football. So for guys like Jaleel Johnson, who are coming in here and probably battling for a position, whether it's in the spot starter role, rotational role, whatever it is, he can focus more on the language of the playbook as opposed to the language of his contract, which is something that he's probably been pretty kind of put a focal point on. When you get to the NFL, the big thing is obviously draft night, hearing your name called if you're so lucky. The next thing is just signing ink, getting that guaranteed money, getting you that first contract so that you can buy your mom that pink Volkswagen that she wanted because she survived breast cancer. Something like that. That first contract matters. So that's really the biggest point to take away here. Any other takeaways from this, or do you want to jump into this new thing?
I think we should just jump into the rankings here. That's the main meat of the show today. So
yeah, I would say so too. Okay, so like I said, I briefly explained this before. It's as simple as it sounds, honestly. 4 teams in the NFC North. We're going to go through each one position by position. Probably do something between 2 and 3 positions per week, depending on what the news situation is looking like. And what we're just going to do is, quarterback, obviously. You think of the 4 quarterbacks: Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Jay Cutler, and Sam Bradford / Teddy Bridgewater, whatever. And Drew and I will go back and forth discussing how those guys should be ranked in accordance with the division, and just basically, it's going to be a black and blue division debate for the next couple of weeks here. That's the goal of this little project here. So let's start it off. I just mentioned for the 4 quarterbacks here. So that's the first position that we're talking. Rodgers, obviously, we did the quarterbacks list already. A lot of these guys didn't make our top 5. I believe there's only one guy on here that made both of our top 5s, and probably rightfully so. So I think Green Bay is very clearly the number one here. But other than that, Drew, kind of break this down for me.
I think looking at what each team offers, I think it's pretty clear the four rankings. Like I think they're in their own tier. They're not really close to each other. There's not, I think kind of some crazy things have to happen in 2017 for one to take over the other.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think Rodgers is the clear number one in Green Bay. I think Stafford's the clear number two in Detroit. For a while there, he's putting up MVP numbers. He was able to pull out some games for Detroit this year that they should not have won, and they earned a playoff berth with not the greatest roster in a year after Calvin Johnson exited the team and retired. So the number three is Sam Bradford. I think he's that next step that people kind of wanted to take. That would essentially move him into the Stafford kind of aura. But he was certainly phenomenal last year given the circumstances. But you want him to kind of prove that another year before you move him up into kind of Stafford status, right around that top 10 range. And then the Bears situation of Mike Glennon and Mitchell Trubisky is kind of that's in your bottom tier in the NFL. However you want to put it. The funny thing is the Vikings are paying essentially the same amount of money as the Bears are, and the Bears have Mike Glennon or paying it to Mike Glennon, and the Vikings are paying Sam Bradford, which a lot of people look at Sam Bradford and think overpaid quarterback. The Bears are in a little bit of a worse situation than that. So, I think so. To recap, Packers, Lions, Vikings, Bears as far as quarterback situations, and I don't see any real debate.
I see no room for debate either there, honestly. And I think that you split it up well by putting it into tiers. Obviously, like we said already, Aaron Rodgers is a top two quarterback. For Drew, he's the clear-cut number one. For me, he's the clear-cut number two. So he's definitely going to be atop this chart in the NFC North. And it's really not close after that, like Drew said. It's very, very obvious that Rodgers is the number one quarterback here. The only one that can really tread water on him, in my opinion, is Stafford. And that's because he does have that upside potential, and he really does have that natural talent to be a game-breaking quarterback and make the difference making plays in the final moments. And he's proven in that regard. He's thrown for over 5,000 yards. I believe he's only three quarterbacks to have done so. With Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, I think, that have hit 5,000 before. Tom Brady, I believe, also. So one of four quarterbacks to do that, so that's a feat. It's a statistical feat, a volume stat feat, but it is one. So he's obviously the number two. The number three obviously has to be Sam Bradford, because I'm not going to rank. If Jay Cutler was still in Chicago, I think he might have a little bit more debate here between who's better, Jay Cutler or Sam Bradford.
The debate wouldn't be a good one though.
Right, but the point here is that Sam Bradford is very clearly better than Mike Glennon. So you just kind of you fall down tiers. I think the greatest debate is between Stafford and Bradford, and I think that most of us, in Minnesota, would argue that that's not much of a debate at this point, at least. If Bradford comes out and has another great season, let's say Bradford throws 28 touchdowns for 4,000 yards or something like that, he satisfies your guys' yards per attempt rankings, hits the 7.8 mark or something like that. Then we can probably start talking about it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's very clear: Rodgers, Stafford, Bradford / Bridgewater's, and then it's Glennon and Trubisky. And the one thing I will say here is, I'll pose this to you: all four separate tiers here of quarterbacks. But does every single team have a blue chip quarterback on their roster, aka a franchise caliber quarterback on their roster right now in the NFC North?
So you're asking if the Bears do, basically? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking essentially, Rodgers is no debate, right? Clear-cut blue chip quarterback, franchise escalator, the peak of franchise quality player. Stafford is kind of right there with them, in my opinion, in terms of being a franchise player, an icon in Detroit.
Yeah.
He's established himself firmly, former number one pick, obviously, out of Georgia, big deal. Nobody's looking to replace him anytime soon. Bradford, I think you could make an argument for. I think you could obviously, we have already made the argument for Teddy Bridgewater, so the Vikings may or may not already have a blue chip quality quarterback on their roster. And then, you get down to Mike Glennon and Trubisky, and I think both of us would say that Glennon is very clearly not a blue chip quarterback, but Trubisky, I mean, it's up for debate, I guess. So, in your mind, is this a 75%, a 50% division? Are we set at quarterback for a couple of years here, or what do you kind of make of this situation?
I think 3 out of the 4 teams are, they have a guy that they can trust moving forward beyond 2017 and probably 2018. Obviously, Rodgers, there's no question about that. Stafford, there's really no question about that either. I think the Vikings, you could argue, have 2 guys that, if Bridgewater recovers like he should and regain some semblance of the form he had in 2015, then you're looking at 2 guys the Vikings have that they could trust and have a choice to pick for the future. Then the Bears, I think, I can't give them that kind of that title that you were trying to give them. I don't trust Glennon yet, and I think Trubisky. Both of us weren't incredibly high on him as a quarterback prospect. That transition from that offense at North Carolina to a pro offense is not going to be an easy one for him. So there's a lot of question marks there. So I'm not ready to give him that title. But I think specifically for the Vikings, I think people are this is where kind of the whole Bradford debate starts. Is he a franchise quarterback, or is he just a mediocre player that will never rise up and be a quarterback that can lead a team into the playoffs and deep into the playoffs? But that's I think the whole debate rests on, he's never had a good team around him. He hasn't had a good offensive line, good receivers. I think that's all valid. I think last year was, even with the horrid offensive line play, it probably was still his best supporting cast with Diggs and Thielen and
definitely
Kyle
the best
Rudolph.
Receivers he's ever played with.
For sure.
Tight end as well. Yeah.
The offensive line still, it's kind of been the story of his career. So if that can perform at subpar level instead of a rock bottom level, then we might see as Sam Bradford that can lead a team to the playoffs. But for now, I will give him the benefit of the doubt there until if the Vikings are healthy this year and he doesn't do it, then I might have to remove that tag from Bradford as well.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much on the same page as you here. No real debate here with Sam Bradford. Obviously, the storyline of his career is very obvious. The couple ACLs blown out, never really lived up to the success of being a number 1 pick. He's shown flashes at times, whether it's in terms of being a good quarterback in the clutch or just throwing for major games. I mean, think about how iconic the moment he had week 2 against Green Bay was. That was an outstanding quarterback performance. He just never really been able to string those together for a full season and accumulate the volume stats and just the overall statistics that appease people when it comes to qualifying a franchise quarterback in the NFL. But I think Sam Bradford is definitely right on the brink. I thought that obviously Teddy Bridgewater, when he went down, was right on the brink. I think a lot of us, the reason why we still talk about Teddy Bridgewater is because he was so close. He was a missed field goal away from winning a postseason game.
Yeah, made that point so many times. How differently would we look at Teddy Bridgewater if Blair Walsh makes that kick? The Vikings win a playoff game against probably a better Seattle team, and they go to Arizona, and who knows, maybe they escape with a win there too.
Game too. Yeah, so it looks a lot different. The landscape looks a lot different at the quarterback position for the Vikings if that kick goes through the uprights as it's supposed to. But it's Minnesota, so everyone knows the standard of that. So I think we're pretty much clear on this quarterback position. Rodgers very, very definitively the number 1. Stafford a strong number. This is a good quarterback division as a whole. Strong number 2. Bradford in the conversation, but really just not on the same page as Stafford right now. Strong number 3 though is in terms of a 4 quarterback division. That's 3 very strong quarterbacks, and then you've got Trubisky, who the Bears obviously hope is their franchise signal caller of the future. So there's hope there for him. Obviously, like Drew said, neither of us were very high on him. Can't really see it right now. I don't think we will really know about Trubisky for at least another year and a half or so, because he's probably not going to see the field. But that's kind of why the Bears are where they are in their rebuilding process, and the Vikings are where they are. Detroit is where they are. And just as a whole, as we get closer to training camp, there's a reason why we kind of are ranking 3 teams in the NFC North as being competitive teams in terms of postseason, and 1 team is kind of just trying to get back to relevancy. That reflects in the quarterback play as well. So that's where we stand right there. A more interesting debate is the running back position, which is the second position we'll do here. This one, again, it's pretty clear. It's more debatable, but I feel like Drew and I will probably be on the same page here as well. Running back groups, it starts with, obviously, Minnesota. Everyone knows Minnesota's running back group at this point. Dalvin Cook, the flashy rookie out of Florida State, Latavius Murray, the offseason signing, and Jerick McKinnon, the H-back flex wide receiver type that kind of has proven that he can't really run between the tackles, but at the same time hasn't had a great situation to work with since Teddy Bridgewater's rookie season. So that's the Vikings. In Green Bay, it's kind of a whole new shakeup. Obviously, you got the wide receiver out there, still wearing the mid-80s number, Ty Montgomery, at the running back spot. You got the new rookies coming in there. Obviously, Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, the two big ones. There's a couple other guys in the mix as well. I believe John Crockett's still somewhere in there. He might be in the tub, but he's somewhere in the mix there. Then you move on down to Chicago, Jordan Howard and Jeremy Langford, two very quality quarterbacks, running backs. One of which torched the Vikings last year, and one of which has given the Vikings a victory over the past two seasons by dropping a pass out of the backfield. So a little bit a nice range there in Chicago in terms of how they played against the Vikings. And then you round out with Detroit with the hometown native in Zach Zenner, who doesn't really have the burst, but he can definitely block and do the fundamental stuff very well. You got Amir Abdullah, who is the guy that they... It's funny because that's the guy that Arizona wanted over David Johnson as their franchise running back, but now the tables have kind of turned a little bit with Abdullah being hurt over the first couple seasons of his career. And then you look at Theo Riddick, who might be the kind of the new age version of Darren Sproles. I think he's probably the closest thing to Darren Sproles now in terms of being the pass-catching running back out of the backfield. Theo Riddick is essentially a glorified wide receiver at this point, but we still list him at the running back position. So that's Detroit's backfield. All said, Drew, how do these four backfields shake up?
It's very, very difficult to not put the Vikings first. It's funny to say that because the Vikings literally had the worst rushing attack ever for a while last season before they managed to get over 3 yards to carry there the last couple weeks of the season. So clearly the running game lacked last season, but they added a guy that scored double-digit touchdowns last year and put up a ton of production in Oakland in Latavius Murray. There are some questions as to how he'll transition with, the offensive line in Oakland was really, really productive and solid and trustworthy, and in Minnesota that's,
not
a
really
bit of a question mark in comparison. So, yeah, I'm putting it lightly by saying it's a bit of a question mark in comparison.
Yep.
That transition's a bit of a question mark, but then you add Dalvin Cook too, first-round talent. He's got superstar potential. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's got a couple knocks, the fumble issues, and kind of this north-south tendency, or this east-west tendency to avoid going north-south, which I think he gets a pass for kind of because of how that breakaway speed that allows him to get to the edge and then burn people on the outside, like we see so many times in his college highlights. So I like that. I like the Vikings group as number one. Number two, I go Detroit here. I think their trio they have, I think you mentioned Riddick quite a bit as a receiver. I think he's kind of what I would like to see Jet McKinnon become as a complement with Cook and Murray as that kind of slot gadget, receiving dynamic playmaker. And Zach Zenner's your in between the tackles runner. That he's not quite doesn't have the size of Murray, but he's kind of fit for that kind of mold. And then Amir Abdullah too, kind of another more of a scat back guy, but he can still run in between the tackles as well. So I like the kind of the versatility and kind of the all the different dimensions that Detroit brings as well. So number three is Chicago. I like Jordan Howard. That guy's phenomenal. He's really the one guy you think of in Chicago. He kind of carries the load and does pretty much all the work in that backfield, but he does it really well. And his stats really, outside of his volume stats, but if he would have started and been kind of the key ball carrier in Chicago for the whole season last year, his stats would have compared on pace. They were compared favorably to Ezekiel Elliott. So that guy can really play, and that's a great value draft pick last year for Chicago. And The number 4 is Green Bay. Tom Montgomery. This isn't a knock on Montgomery because transitioning from wide receiver to running back is no easy task. But he could certainly play. And then they added 2 rookies too, which is they're still, there's certainly a lot of talent there, but again, question marks there, and you don't really know what to expect. So I got Minnesota number 1. I got Detroit number 2. I got Chicago number 3. I got Green Bay number 4, rounding out my rankings for the running back position.
Okay, so for me, I'm pretty much on the same page with you on top. The Vikings, in my opinion, it's not even really a debate, and I'd like to make it a debate in order to make this seem as realistic as possible in terms of ranking without bias. But I just don't see a way to not rank the Vikings running back group number 1. When you look at the overall level of talent and just the different dimensions that are offered within the 3 guys. And Cook, Murray, and McKinnon, I think it's very clear that this is the most talented group. It remains to be seen if they will be the most productive group, just because Murray is new and Calvin is new as well. But I just think that this is a pretty clear number 1 group, and I think that you'll see Dalvin Cook break on the scene real quick and be a very high-impact player for the Vikings, which will just immediately shoot this group up from being a quality group with Murray and McKinnon to just kind of being a major strength for the Vikings moving forward. So that's why they're the clear number 1 for me. Number 2, I have Chicago instead of Detroit. So Drew and I have a little bit of disparity here. I have Chicago number 2, and it's not Matt Forte anymore, so it's not as clear. Chicago's running game it used to be Matt Forte, and that was all said and done. I mean, Matt Forte was one of the he was lethal, and he was really annoying to deal with for a very long time. So that's not the transition to Jeremy Langford didn't work out as hoped. Langford kind of took a major step backwards in his second season in Chicago, but Jordan Howard filled that role really nicely. Obviously, he had the longest run from scrimmage against the Vikings defense last year. I believe it was that 64-yarder that J-Ron Kersover pursued on the left side of the line that kind of sprung him out. He obviously, like Drew said, very quality player, a guy that was right up there in terms of rookie production with Ezekiel Elliott and just some of these other guys that have came out over the last couple of years. So this is a very talented player, and if Langford can figure it out, this is a very good pass catching back as well. So they have a nice tandem there. I am curious how it shapes out with Trubisky, assuming that he comes into the offense based on the fact that he's going to be running the shotgun, and I see Jordan Howard as more of a I-form, single-back type runner, so I'm curious how that will affect his game. We'll see, obviously, when Trubisky is immersed into the offense, because, like we've said a couple of times here, he ran 98% shotgun at UNC, and that will be his comfort zone is the shotgun. So we'll see what happens there. But right now, still number 2, Jordan Howard, Jeremy Langford, strong tandem for Chicago. That should get some stuff done, and really, it's really the duo of athletes on their offense right now that can keep them relevant is Howard running for 150 yards and a couple touchdowns in games. So they do have that going for them. Number 3, Detroit. I don't think that Green Bay has enough credibility right now in terms of production and just overall potential, ceiling. I like Jamal Williams and I like Aaron Jones. I just don't see them as players that are of the same level as Amir Abdullah. Abdullah is your high potential guy on that depth chart. Obviously, Zenner is a very quality player that's going to give you good pass protection, but at the same time, you also know what he is. He doesn't have much burst up the middle. He's not a game-breaking talent, but he's going to give you the fundamentals. He's going to give you special teams reps. He's a good overall player to have on the roster. I just wouldn't say that he's a player that elevates this group into, being a higher ranking on this list. Amir Abdullah is really the player that could be the difference maker for me, and he needs to stay healthy in order for that to happen. Theo Riddick, like I said before, basically a glorified wide receiver, so I kind of knock them unfairly just because I do think of him as a wide receiver more than I think of him as a running back. But at the same time, he offers that role, and like Drew said, he's established in that H-back role that we'd like to see McKinnon develop into. So they do have that going for them already. So in terms of pass catching production out of the backfield, Detroit is probably atop this list. But just an overall, you need to see more from Abdullah before you can rank this group higher, in my personal opinion, just because he's been hurt over the last couple of years, and we haven't really gotten to see the player that he was when he was at Nebraska at the NFL level. And then, like I said, obviously number 4 is the Packers with Ty Montgomery, who played very well as a running back last year. I get the feeling that as teams watch film, they'll be able to catch on to the things that he hasn't been able to do, that he's been doing well, but maybe just over time, you think that he's just not developed enough as a running back to do what he did last year again without improving dramatically after putting out the film and allowing teams to really game plan against him. So
he's going to get figured out at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I worry about their backfield in that regard. At the same time, I did like Jamal Williams coming out of BYU. It's a player that I thought the Vikings could benefit from drafting. Had they not drafted Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones, Adam Warwick at VT named this guy as one of his favorite running backs. So
gotta give him a shout out.
Yeah, gotta give him a shout out. That was his guy. So I'm sure he'll love seeing him play in Green Bay. So that's that kind of rounds out that running back group there for me. I think it's pretty clear. Any other major takes on just the division as a whole and as far as running backs go?
Well, I think my thing was I put Detroit number 2. I think mostly because they bring kind of that. It's first. I mean, with Howard, I guess I don't really like Langford as much, and I think Howard's kind of carried the whole, the bulk most of the time. He does essentially all the work at the position for the Bears. And in Detroit, you get a trio of guys that can do different things and kind of fit in with what Detroit wants to do in different situations. So in that regard, I like Detroit more than Chicago at the running back position. But, I mean, it's not a huge deal, obviously. There's, it's not like it's Detroit significantly better, in my opinion. I think Howard's a fantastic player, and he's better than all 3 guys in a one-on-one comparison that Detroit has. But I just think the overall what Detroit brings to the table kind of is more than what Howard brings to the table.
Yeah, and that's a fair take. There's a reason why it's debatable in that middle range right there. The only reason why I have the Bears ahead of the Lions is strictly Jordan Howard, and it's just because I think that he has the ability to get better so long as Dowell Loggins and Chicago allow him to get better and kind of create a mutual situation for him and Trubisky to coexist and not create this Adrian Peterson, Teddy Bridgewater shotgun versus single back offense that just kind of telegraphs everything you're trying to do, which is something I'm worried about for Chicago moving forward here. But with Mike Glennon already, that's one benefit of Mike Glennon is that he has played in both the single back and the shotgun, so you don't have to transition too much immediately. If assuming that Glennon's going to be the starter, and I think that all of us can kind of assume that he will be the starter at least immediately.
Paid him $15 million. I sure hope he's the starter.
Yeah.
Right?
So exactly. So I think that that's kind of the situation right now at the running back position. I think that next year around this time, the rankings could flip quite a bit. I think that you can see, Green Bay go all the way up to as high as number 2. I think that you could see Minnesota go out into the stratosphere and just kind of be on an island in terms of running back production once again with the lineup that they got trotting out. And I think that you could see Detroit get better or get worse depending on Abdullah, and you could see Chicago get better or get worse depending on what I was just talking about there in terms of schematics. So there's a lot of volatility there just as a whole, but I think that as of right now, I think that we're pretty definitive in Minnesota being tier 1. The tier 2 being Chicago and Detroit, with Green Bay being a very close tier 3 that could be a tier 2 running back group, but just as a whole, I mean, I'm just not comfortable giving a group a tier 2 title that's led by a wide receiver that might actually end up being a better running back than he was at wide receiver. But at this point, that's kind of where I'm at as a whole.
You need to show more. I mean, you get 2 rookies and you got Montgomery, who, I think eventually defenses are going to figure out his weaknesses and his strengths and, know how to attack it and figure that out because, that was a wild situation last year where you get a guy from wide receiver playing running back and there wasn't a lot of film on him and defenses were kind of, scrapping to find ways to, figure that out and play against it. So I think he'll be figured out this year, and I think he'll still be effective, but I think he'll certainly it'll be a down year, I guess, if in air quotes. I have air quotes right now for those listening and not watching on YouTube. that is it'll be a down year, but it'll still be a productive year, I think, for Montgomery.
I just put it simply. There's a reason why Green Bay drafted 3 more running backs despite Montgomery's production.
Yeah,
they wanted to hedge their bet, and Jamal Williams is a good player to hedge their bet on. But I guess we'll kind of see how that shakes up. But like I said, this is a team that could be very good at the running back position, or they could be very poor. And I think that their bottom ranking in terms of the NFC North at this point reflects that notion. So that rounds out the NFC North rankings for this week. Let's talk our top 5, take 5 segment here. This week we're doing Vikings moments, and I'll just get this out of the way right now. I'm a little bit nervous because I don't want to miss any moments. I know that I'm definitely going to at some point probably skip over something, or we're going to miss something. So be sure to leave that in the comments section. And then we'll finish out the episode with some questions from Twitter. So let's start with the Take 5 now, Drew. I know that this is something we've been kind of conjuring up for a couple of weeks here, so I expect some good results out of you. Give me your top 5 Vikings moments since the turn of the millennium.
Yeah, I have 2 honorable mentions I want to start with right away. The Jared Allen sack against Donald Penn that we talked about on the last show, I believe. That was an all-time, There wasn't, as far as a game situation, I think the Vikings got beat by double digits in the game, but, the fight and the trash talk and the bloody nose and the Allen hyping up the crowd and then beating Penn for the sack on the very next play is, you can't really script that. So that's obviously needs some recognition. And then my next honorable mention is Adrian Peterson running for 296 yards at the Metrodome. That guy, man. You can't really. It leaves you speechless what he did in that game.
It's hard to talk about the Vikings and not talk about Adrian Peterson.
Right. I think he had less than 50 yards at halftime, and then he just ripped the Chargers apart.
And it was against LaDainian Tomlinson too. It was like a passing the torch game.
It was, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so. And he had, I think, at least 2 touchdowns over 50 yards, and just. Jim Kleinsasser was throwing textbook blocks left and right. It was a sight to see for sure. So anyway, number 5, the 2012 season finale, beating the Packers at the Dome. Christian Ponder playing the game of his life. Adrian Peterson surpassing 2,000 yards. It was a game I did not expect the Vikings to win, and it got him a playoff berth. It was against the Packers. It was a back and forth, entertaining game. I think it was 37-34, I believe, so lots of scoring. Just one of those all-time great football games that the ones we want to see week 17. And the Vikings came out on the good end of that. Unfortunately, the following week they were throttled by Green Bay, but that's beside the point here. So number 4 is kind of. I'm wrapping 2 into 1 here, and it's another Packer game. Well, I guess 2 Packers games. I have Favre beating Green Bay twice in 2009. That was just so sweet. You could tell too the way Favre, like, after the game and the way he talked about it and the way there's clips of him in the locker rooms after both games and the way he was so psyched, and he would. I remember. After I think it was the first game at the Metrodome where he broke it down after the game and 1-2-3 Vikings, and then he just gave this big huge fist pump and said yes. And it's caught on camera, and it's so perfect, and you could tell he wanted to kick Green Bay's butt. So those are, it doesn't get better than that in the Favre days anyway. Number 3, I have the Cowboys playoff win, or I guess when the Vikings beat the Cowboys, because this is an unpopular take that I have that I've kind of getting slack for, but I don't like I hate the Cowboys more than I hate the Packers, I guess. I just don't like watching Jerry Jones on my TV screen. I don't like seeing his face on there. And I just think the Cowboys have too many bandwagon fans across the country after the 90s and how great they were, and fans just kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and now their kids are jumping on the bandwagon. Yeah, and now it's the perfect timing for the kids to jump on the bandwagon now with Dak and Elliott, and so Yeah, I don't like the Cowboys, so beating them 34-3 was fun. And Sidney Rice, your boy, had 3 touchdowns, so that was a fun game as well. Number two is Brett Favre to Greg Lewis. Again, Favre magic. I remember because that was 2 days after I had surgery to repair a hernia, so I was lying on my couch watching the game, and I could tell I was getting excited about kind of the way this was ending, and I knew that the Vikings had a slim chance, but I was definitely supposed to be resting, and my heart rate was way higher than it should have been at the time. And then Lewis caught the touchdown and whatever, and I was bouncing up and down and in my house, and I was 13 years old at the time, so I was just going bonkers like a little kid. And then I realized kind of after the dust had settled and it sunk into me what actually happened, I realized, oh man, this actually hurts quite a bit. And my bandage had come loose on me, and there was kind of a mess. I don't want to get too much into the details, but yeah, that was an interesting and a fun experience for me. Number 1 is the Randy Moss Moon at Lambeau. That's goes without saying. One of the greatest Vikings ever performing one of the greatest acts ever to a fan base that we all kind of don't like. So it was a disgusting act, as Joe Buck says, but it was one of my favorite. It was my favorite moment as a Vikings fan since 2000.
Okay, so my list isn't a whole lot different than Drew's. It's a little bit different in terms of order, but I think you'll see a lot of the same moments pop up here. A couple honorable mentions for me. One that I just want to throw out there that's not really a moment, it's just kind of like a picture in my head is the throw, Adrian Peterson's throw that Cleveland Browns defensive back in week 1 of 2009. So there's that play, and then also when he just absolutely leveled Randall Gay over the middle against Pittsburgh. Just straight up went through him. Just those moments where we kind of what we've defined Adrian Peterson's career off of. Those just not willing to go out of bounds type moments.
There are so many of those in Peterson's career too. He shook a defender out of his ankles, or he went through 7 tacklers into the end zone. I mean, against
the Cowboys, there's that moment too where he just literally just kind of trucked forward against the entire.
That's
I have a picture where it's literally like it's where his feet are off the ground and there are 5 Cowboys around him.
Chase Ford caught him from falling, and then he just went through 4 more guys and scored on that.
So it's there's so many of those Adrian Peterson moments. So just to get the better ones out of the way, there's honorable mentions. I want to throw those out there, and I think it's also a good time to mention that. Remember how people used to think that it was like Chris Johnson was better than Adrian Peterson, and they picked a new guy. It was Arian Foster for a couple of years. Guys, it was always Adrian Peterson. It always was. He was always the best running back. I don't care if you got CJ 2K or Arian Foster had a good 6-game stretch, whatever it was. It was always Adrian Peterson. And I think it's a good point to reference that now. Just so that,
it is.
For fans that are still healing from Adrian Peterson, remember that. It was always Adrian Peterson. So those are my honorable mentions. We'll start here. My list is kind of a mix of both exciting and just kind of Vikings-esque moments, so I'm not all happy here. Number 5 for me is Adrian Peterson setting up the game-winning field goal against Green Bay. The same moment that Drew talked about with Christian Ponder playing the game of his career, Jarius Wright catching that touchdown in the back of the end zone. I was at that game, so that was one of my favorite games that I've ever personally been at. So that set off one of the greatest weeks of my life, because if you remember, that was right ahead of New Year's. So we had New Year's after that, and that was when I was, a couple of years ago back in my my heyday. So we had New Year's, and then we also went snowboarding for a weekend of 4 days of drinking and snowboarding and that kind of stuff. So that was one of the best 10-day periods of my life.
That's a fun weekend.
That was when I just turned 21. So I went to Vegas with my dad too. Yeah. So it was a great. It's a good
birthday present from Ponder and Blair Walsh and Peterson.
Exactly. So that was a great segment for me. That was that comes in at number 5 for me. Number 4 is the Jared Allen sack, what Drew mentioned as an honorable mention. It's one of my favorite plays just ever. I was so amped because I remember I was sitting there and one of my buddies, I still have the picture of him too, one of my good buddies he's a football coach now, which makes it all the funnier, but he's wearing a Vikings helmet with the single bar, so it's like the Gary Anderson style helmet, right? And he's got this helmet on, and he's wearing a Jared Allen jersey, and he's not the type of dude that gets pumped up. He's more the type of guy that when he talks, you listen. So he was getting excited, and it was like making everyone else excited too, because he was sitting there like kind of bouncing up and down, and we got this huge widescreen going on in front of us, and it was in college, right? So it was just one of those moments where like all of us were just amped, and I think that I want to say that I was with someone that had something against Jared Allen too, so everyone was kind of like giving him like the like
because he's one of those guys that people can not like. Right, I can totally see someone
if you're like a Bears fan or something. I was probably with like a Bears fan or a Detroit Lions fan, something like that in Milwaukee. Yeah. So that's how that went down, and then when that play developed and just watching the electricity of the stadium, it was just an unbelievable moment. So that comes in at number 4 for me. Number 3, this one's going to be controversial, the Tracy Porter interception. So I hate Tracy Porter, and when we get to the point when we talk about the players that we hate the most, I think that'll be a list at some point. You'll see Tracy Porter come in at number 1 for me. But at the same time, this was the best football game that I've ever witnessed. Right? The Vikings didn't. Yeah. The Vikings didn't win. Garrett Hartley broke my heart in overtime, obviously. But that was just like straight up from a fan perspective. If you're looking at this game from like just a universal look, and you're looking down at it and you're thinking, all right, say you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, this game doesn't mean anything to you. It's 2 NFC teams that you might play in the Super Bowl. I mean, that game was just unbelievable. It was so much fun to watch. It was like that 49ers game, that 49ers-Falcons game that went back and forth that Colin Kaepernick ended up winning. It was like the same type of level where it's just...
But you don't ever worry, think about how many chances the Vikings had to put that away and how many turnovers they had in the red zone. You don't think about any of that?
I mean, I watch that game 3 or 4 times a year still. Because I've charted all of it too. I love that game. It's my favorite game of all time. I know we lost, but I love that football game, and it really just came down to that one throw. It's all it can. If you miss,
or that one decision, or that one
the Bernard Berrian fumble, or the Percy Harvin fumble, or the Adrian Peterson fumble. Yes, I know. There's all the times when they could have done it, but just as a whole, that moment for me is iconic, and it's one of the reasons behind my fire of being a Vikings fan. The reason why I want to win a Super Bowl so bad is because I finally got that Vikings moment, right? That was in 2009 when they blew it, and obviously since then I had the Blair Walsh moment as well to add to my repertoire, but I wasn't really involved. 1998, I was 7 or 8 years old, so I had the Gary Anderson kick. I mean, I've seen it a million times. I've watched that game a million times, right. But it wasn't my Vikings moment. 2009 was my Vikings moment, so that's why Tracy Porter and his pick come in at number 3. It was just such a magical season, and obviously, yeah, it sucked that it ended that way, but it was just, I don't know. It was an unbelievable game again. I remember watching that with my buddies. It was a lot of fun. So that one comes in at number 3. Back to the happy stuff. Number 2, Trey Waynes' pick. Week 2 last year. I was
going to mention that at the end if you didn't mention that. That was when I.
That was okay. So I've talked a lot about how Sam Bradford has solidified himself in history as being an iconic Vikings quarterback just because he won that game. Trey Waynes is going down in Vikings history. He may never amount to anything, and while I do think that he's going to be a breakout star this year, he could do nothing for the rest of his life, and we will always remember the name Trey Waynes because he picked off that pass in the first game at US Bank Stadium. So that makes that moment not only iconic, but it's memorable just because 17-14, that game was Aaron Rodgers. How many of you guys listening, Drew, you can answer this as well, how many of you guys thought Aaron Rodgers was going to march down the field and win that football game right there, then and there? Because I sure did.
I'm raising my hand.
I'm sitting there. I've got a $50 bet with my Packers fan buddy standing next to me. I've got my Stephon Diggs jersey on. He's got his Aaron Rodgers jersey on. I've got 181 receiving yards and a couple touchdowns on the board. He's looking for his quarterback to come down the field and win the game for him, and not going to happen because Trey Waynes.
The thing was, too, Rodgers was picking on Trey Waynes the entire game.
Yes.
Waynes had a couple penalties. They were beating him all over the place. And they had just – so I think the Packers had just run that same route for Jordy Nelson and beat Waynes on it. It was that little poco to the left. And this time Wayne sat on it and picked it off. And I don't think Rodgers expected that at all. And
if you look back at our Twitter feeds, from that game, like if you were live tweeting that game, look at your Twitter feed from that game. I guarantee early on, like first quarter, second quarter, you were like, damn it, Trey Waynes, not again.
Oh, I did the same thing. That's
what is wrong? What is wrong with you? Why can't you figure this out? Why aren't you Marcus Peters? Whatever it is, whatever horrific stuff you came up with. And then as soon as he picked off that pass, thank you, Trey Waynes. You're the best cornerback ever. I love you. Whatever it is. It was just it was unbelievable. And that was...
And Mike Zimmer's vertical leap when he saw Waynes pick it off, about 40 inches. I mean, that he got up in the air.
Yeah, it was
most athletic thing I've ever seen Zimmer do.
Yeah, it was a special moment for him, too, because that was like... Waynes is kind of his project, right? Like, the guy that Zimmer picked... Well, I guess kind of Barr was, too. But Waynes is the cornerback, the defensive back guru, whatever. It was a big moment for both Zimmer, Waynes, everyone involved. And like I said, he goes down in Vikings lore for that play. And then number one here, again, the Randy Moss Boone gets honorable mention, always one of my favorite plays. But for me, the Greg Lewis catch, again, we're going back to 2009. I think you guys will see me favor this year throughout my top 5 rankings as we do this, this segment throughout the rest of the offseason here. I think you'll see 2009 come up a lot for me. And that Greg Lewis catch, I just, it was okay. I'll set this one up for you guys as I'm embarrassed to say this, but I wasn't on board the Favre train when he came from when he
really.
Yeah, so it wasn't because I hated Favre as a Packer. I just thought he wasn't good anymore, straight up. Because after the year in New York, I thought he was done. And so in my head, remember, I'm about 18 years old at this point. In my head, I'm thinking I'd rather develop Tavares Jackson than get one crap year from Favre as he kind of waddles his way into retirement. So the first couple games that season, obviously the Cleveland one, that was all Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson had 3 touchdowns in that game. Didn't really matter that Favre was alive. Second game, a lot of the same thing. Really, Childress was still leaning on Peterson. And the 49ers game was really the first time when Childress he had no choice but to let loose with Favre coming down the stretch there because they were losing the game. A field goal wasn't going to do it. You needed a touchdown. You finally got to see Favre really air it out. And it was the moment where I think he kind of snapped back into being Brett Favre again, where like that whatever the injury or the labrum injury, whatever that was bugging him in New York, it didn't faze him anymore. He was just back to being himself. And so that moment where he it was a microcosm of all of his glory in Green Bay, in Minnesota, kind of like righting the ship. Right, so for the Antonio Freeman overtime catch that was trash that he beat the Vikings on, he comes back and instead this is probably the most ridiculous, game-changing, game-winning, whatever moment, run around your house naked moment in recent Vikings lore, right? I mean, I can't think of another moment that was more... That was
ever?
A walk.
Is there a moment like that ever?
I mean, you can talk about like Anthony Barr's scoop and score touchdown against Tampa Bay, that walk off or Jarius Wright's 80-yarder to win it against the Jets in overtime. There are these moments, but in terms of like comeback, game-winning 2-minute drill victory, again, Teddy Bridgewater at Soldier Field was very nice as well. But this moment was like no one else could have done it. It had to be Favre. No one else was going to put that bar on an absolute P to the end zone. Greg Lewis caught, I think, 6 balls that entire season. Like something like it was like I think he had.
He was signed that week. Signed that week.
Yeah, and I think he caught 6 passes for like 80 yards and then that 1 touchdown in his Vikings that season with the Vikings. So it was just the perfect storm. I mean, it was magic. It was literally magic. No one else could have done it. So for me,
throw is a top 5 throw that I have ever seen. I mean, the anticipation he had because and he said after the game he had no idea who actually it was. He just saw somebody in purple, but Lewis was bracketed, and he was behind the 2 guys he was actually running past. So Favre anticipated Lewis going past them, and then threw that ball 40-something yards in the air on a dime in the exact spot it had to be.
Yeah, right at the back that was on Greg Lewis too, right? To break off his original route combination and just to kind of get on the
he had to flow to the right where Favre was rolling out. Yeah,
right. He had to link with Favre without obviously being like, "Hey, Brett, I'm going to go this way." He couldn't do that obviously, so it was like he had to get on the same page with them, like just mentally speaking, and it was just like I said, it was the perfect storm of magic. So for me, that's the clear-cut number one. I think the Randy Moss moon is right there.
I like the moon. The moon, man.
I could easily have ranked that here. The Tracy Porter interception kind of replaces that in terms of moments that really have defined me as a Vikings fan. Just because, again, if I was older when I saw that moment, because I love the Paul Allen call for that particular play, because that's the one where he burned Al Harris, touchdown, and I mean it was just like, if you look at that play, yeah, it's unbelievable, but just
one-handed catch too.
Yeah, I mean it was crazy. It's right there too, and that one easily could be in my top 5 list. But the Greg Lewis catch really is what defines my Vikings fandom. So that is my top 5 moments. Okay. Any final takeaways here from your take 5, or any last minute thoughts before I take us out here?
Not really. I think I think we should have thrown in some Teddy Bridgewater moments, because he probably has a few, honestly. The Jarius Wright touchdown you mentioned is a big one.
There's the preseason one against Arizona. I mean, that was when I fell in love with, that was when I personally fell in love with Teddy Bridgewater.
That's when a lot of people fell in love with Teddy Bridgewater, yeah. And then there's the touchdown.
Because he threw the fade to I think the guy's name was Rodney. Wasn't it Rodney Adams too?
Rodney Smith.
Rodney Smith. Yeah, and that was when the Vikings were obviously still looking for receivers too. So that looked really good for Rodney Smith at the time. And I liked Rodney Smith. Yeah. I didn't think he was great, but I did like Rodney Smith more than a lot of guys. Yeah. So I guess that's for me, the Teddy Bridgewater moment, since we're kind of doing the Teddy Bridgewater moment thing. And of course, we'd only do
another
this
tangent. We got time to do a tangent. There's not really much to talk
about. We would only do this for Teddy Bridgewater too. We would never do this for Sam Bradford.
We should do this. We could either do this now, or we could do a take 5 for the next show and a Teddy Bridgewater only.
Yeah, I mean, instead of doing a Teddy Bridgewater centric one, we can get this out of the way, I think, pretty quick. The number one Teddy Bridgewater moment for me is just the Soldier Field win. I mean, first
Stephon Diggs touchdown.
Yeah, there's the Stephon Diggs touchdown. There's the Charles Johnson catch, the only catch in traffic I think he's ever had in his entire career, stepping in front of Antrell Roll to catch that ball that probably should have been a pick. And it was really the first time we saw Bridgewater just kind of throw a ball up in the air and hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, he's a very calculated quarterback, but in that moment, he did that, and people knock him for it by saying, well, Roll should have picked it off. Well, yeah, but Bridgewater threw the ball and Johnson made the play. Isn't that what a quarterback is supposed to do? Give his guys the best opportunity to catch a touchdown or catch the football, whatever. That was just, the turning point in that game. I'm never going to forget it, because he should have been sacked on like 2nd and 20, and he wiggled his way free. I'm trying to remember who the pass rusher was that had him pinned. It was the old Ravens pass rusher that is on Chicago still now. I can't think of his name right now off the top of my head, but it was one of those situations where the Vikings were backed against the wall in a place that they never win at Soldier Field, and Bridgewater found the magic. I mean, this is the reason why we love Teddy Bridgewater, is because he's able to find that magic where Sam Bradford throws a pick to Darius Slay. I know that there's no good way to quantify clutch gene, and there's no. It's unfair.
There never will be.
It's unfair to pick out moments and just be like, this guy's better because this moment is superior to that one. I get that.
That's a terrible take, by the way. Like, if someone actually picks Teddy Bridgewater threw a touchdown to Stephon Diggs at Soldier Field here, so he's clearly the guy in the clutch.
Right. It's an unfair take. It's stupid, but just generally speaking, a lot of people hang on. I'm one of the people, I think, that hangs on to Bridgewater because he does have that magic in him. And he does, yeah. And I still wonder if Bradford does.
He does it. He's done it repeatedly. I was saying more like as in any take really in sports at all. It doesn't. I'm not really pertaining to this issue, but because Teddy has done it over time and time again, where he's made the key play in the key situation, and that's obviously where Bradford can struggle at times, but. Yeah.
I mean, it started in Arizona with Teddy, obviously, as soon as he got here in the preseason, and it never really quit. So, for those of you hanging on to Bridgewater for that reason, I am in your boat for sure, because that magic is the one thing that might separate Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Bradford. Again, I'm just fueling the fire in the debate right now. I'm not picking sides. I'm simply saying that
it's always fun to start a fight. Yeah,
I do.
Gasoline on.
I mean, starting a fight on Twitter is always funny because there's no consequences, which is what makes Twitter both very easy to hate and very easy to love at the exact same time, depending on if you're a bystander or if you're in the middle of it. I think that about wraps up our Take 5 segment here for this week, and I think wraps the podcast as well, unless you got anything else I'm missing here.
We are going to go through our Twitter question. We got a couple sent to us, actually.
Nice.
I will bring those up quickly here. All right. From @VikingKing888. He's asking us a couple things here. Why isn't Austin Pastor signed yet? He's, I think, the free agent was playing for Cleveland.
Yep.
It is kind of that's intriguing for sure. That's why he's not signed. And then, could Aviante Collins replace Boone in 2018, which is also an intriguing thing where, you've mentioned Collins at left guard instead of left tackle. So, I mean, if you want to touch on Pasture or Collins, go ahead.
I mean, let's do it like this since we are running out of time. Just give a quick 2-line take on both of them. The reason why Pastor hasn't been signed, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know why the other teams haven't signed him. I would assume there's something to do with he wants a certain amount of money and believes he's worth X, and so he's kind of waiting it out for a team to have an offensive tackle go down so he can make more money. That's the only logical explanation I have on that regard. In terms of what was the second part of this question here?
It was could Aviante Collins replace Alex Boone?
Could he? Yeah, maybe. Am I ready to say yes, he's able to do that? No, I want to see him make the 53 and kind of support the support that I have given him from my vantage point, saying that he is a quality offensive guard.
This is the correct. I mean, you've been the one kind of leading the ship for Collins to move to the left guard.
Yeah,
and this fits in kind of your line of thinking.
That is important. It's important on how the coaches decide to use him first, right? If the coaches put him at guard, I think yes, he does have the potential, because when Boone's contract expires, obviously he'll be looking for. He's going to be old. He's going to be a veteran guard at that point, and if he doesn't continue to improve, you'll be looking for a guy to replace him at a cheaper cost. So yes, I think there's potential. I want to see training camp first. I need to know if this guy has the dog mentality that I think that he does before I make any drastic suggestions like, what might happen in 2018.
Yeah. I mean, could he? Yes. But, don't put your house on it or anything like that.
Please don't put your house on that.
Please don't do that.
So, any other Twitter questions we will pick up next week. We're running out of time here. Somehow we hit the 60-minute mark once again. So, thanks, as always, for listening to the show. You know where to find us on Twitter at VikingsATLPod. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Vikings Territory, the usual spots. And Drew and I will still be trying to conjure up stuff to write about and discuss over this period of time that it really sucks. It's brutal in terms of Viking stuff. So we'll be pumping out content at VT hopefully as frequently as possible. And like I said last time, show is scheduled to post every week, Tuesday and Thursday for the rest of the off season. So you can expect to hear us back on Thursday when we will see you guys then. All right. Thanks, folks.